Welcome to Truth Telling with Elizabeth D'Alto, the show dedicated to focusing on the truth that is always evolving within us and around us, where we explore the potentiality of truth as a highly esteemed value at a time in history when most people have more on their plates than any one human should. This podcast aims to cut through the noise, the ignorance, and the complexity of 21st century living by exploring the truths of a diverse range of incredible voices. From authors, artists, creatives, and educators to activists, speakers, and those in various scientific and esoteric fields, our guests hail from cultures and countries all over the world. On Mondays, we post interviews, and on Sundays, we post sermons, which are more personal and revolve around whatever I'm musing on that week. No episode of this show is meant for everyone, and every episode is meant for whoever needs it on the right day at the right time, and you never know when that might be for you. Not all guest views will reflect my own, and that's intentional. We don't learn, grow, heal, or improve by staying in our comfortable bubbles with all of our people who look, think, or live exactly how we do. In this show, you'll get the full range. Everything from health, communication, money, success, parenting, desire, and spirituality, to making pivots and transitions in life, and topics related to psychology, storytelling, gender and race issues, emotional intelligence, and sacred activism. We can learn a lot from each other, and we need each other. You can expect courageous conversations when you tune into the show that will range from insightful, uplifting, and illuminating to uncomfortable and sometimes even confrontational. But no matter what, they'll always be filled with compassion and curiosity. Each episode invites you, with a ton of love and respect, to listen with your heart and mind wide open. If you love what you hear or find it useful and inspiring, the best way to show your appreciation is to share the episode and subscribe. Thank you so much for listening, and now for today's show. This is episode number 235 of Truth Telling with Elizabeth D'Alto. Today we have Julie Santiago with us, and Julie is a former Wall Street trader turned writer, speaker, teacher, and guide for women. When I asked Julie our opening question, she had two big truths to share with us. The first she called universal, and it was, we all know who we are and what we want. And the second she called personal. She said, I want my life to be super simple. So we dove into both, specifically how she's simplifying, the paradox of control. We have so much control and so much is out of our control. We got into the drive to be known, to know ourselves and to be understood, being complete without kids, and navigating personal growth while being in a long-term relationship when your partner isn't necessarily on the same path you are. I was particularly excited to ask Julie that question because this is something I hear a lot from listeners and women in my programs. They are starting to grow, but their partners aren't, and they don't know how to handle it. They're afraid they're going to lose their relationships. And so Julie is someone I know who had the perspective of starting before her partner did, but working through it together and making it out on the other side. She also shared what it was like growing up in Louisiana in a Lebanese family. So this is a really juicy interview that took a lot of twists and turns and joy. And you can visit the show notes at untameyourself.com/T as in truth, T as in telling -235. Again, that's untameyourself.com/TT-235. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Truth Telling with Elizabeth D'Alto. I am here with my friend Julie Santiago, and I met Julie. It is over 3 years ago now. How weird is that, by the way, that was over 3 years ago?
It's crazy. So much life has happened between now and then. Oh
my God, so much life. We were at an event called Soul Camp that was in the Pocono Mountains in Pennsylvania. It was a good time. And I think we'd been having one of those experiences where it's like, I know who you are, but I don't know who you are, but I'm really glad to meet you. And you remind me so much of myself. I like you even more.
I see all the good things about myself in you, and I love you.
Yeah, I love it. So my first question that I like to ask people is, what is a truth that's having a big impact on your life right now?
Yeah. I have two. Can I share two?
Of course.
So I have a universal truth that feels like it's really shaking me, that feels just true with a capital T. And then I have a personal truth. So the universal truth is something that I danced around for my whole life, which is when women say, I want to know who I am, why I'm here. I don't know what I want. I don't know who I am. I don't know. I don't believe that. I think it's a lie. I think the truth with a capital T is that we all know who we are. and we all know what we want. But what happens over time is we get covered with all of the stuff, the mask, the layers, the armor, and the work is peeling back all that to remember who we are and what we want. So that dance of like, I don't know, like if I could just figure out who I am, or I think it's crap. I think we all know at our core who we are and what we want. We've just forgotten. So that the journey is remembering. So that's the truth that's been touching me deeply, personally, and in my work. So that's the first one. And then the second one, the personal truth, is I want my life to be so much simpler than I ever imagined. And that is my own truth that has been rocking me pretty significantly the past handful of months. It's just really getting clear.
Here's what I love about everything you just shared. Number one, I like that you distinguished between universal and personal truth.
Yeah.
Because that's actually something we talk about in the introduction to the podcast, which is like there are universal truths, there are absolute truths, and then there are personal truths. Like truth, we treat truth around here like a very fluid and ever-evolving thing, right? But I also love that you were talking about wanting everything to be super simple, because unconsuming ourselves is a big part of what I teach and what I help people with. Something I say a lot too is that we're living at a time where most people have more on their plate than any one person should. It is complex. So what's some of the stuff you're juggling right now that you're trying to simplify?
Great question. So I have work, of course. We all have work. I have work that I care about. I have work that I love. I have friendships. I have a marriage and a partnership with a man I care about. I just moved out of San Francisco into the country, which is kind of part of this desire to really simplify. But I think more than anything else, and I know that you're going to understand this more than anyone, it's not just the amount of stuff that I have on my plate. It's the amount of stuff that goes through my head at any given time. So it's the striving, it's the inability sometimes for the mind to sit in the present moment and appreciate all that is without scanning for what's next. Or that incessant drive to keep going, to keep creating, to keep doing. So I would actually say that that's more of my practice right now. Not even, like, I've simplified a lot of life, but it's the head stuff that is tricky.
I can really relate to this because I didn't realize, so you may or may not know that I moved to Malibu. And so I've been living here, and it's still Los Angeles County, but it's not like all up in LA.
Yeah.
And I'd passed through here. I'd never spent more than 2 days here.
Yeah.
And so I didn't necessarily realize how isolated I would be.
Yeah.
And it took some getting used to. And now I am obsessed with it, actually.
Totally.
I'm like, oh my God, like I could go into LA. I have so many friends in LA. People come visit me. When I moved out here, I was like, I need to have a guest room. That seems very impractical that one person should be in a 3-bedroom, 3-bathroom place. I was like, I needed a bedroom, an office, and a guest room. And I was like, what the hell? This is a lot of space for one person. I was like, I'm going to need it. Like you're saying, like we always know. There's always a part of us that knows. Yeah. So I could super relate to that about like simplifying life. I wasn't even intentionally trying to do that. But, we're always being taken care of.
Totally. And I think it's so funny. And I don't know if your ego did a little dance around this, but mine did. I just moved to a town of 1,000 people from San Francisco.
Okay, that's different. There's a sign in Malibu. I think it's 18,000 here. So
yeah.
You win.
It's the contrast though. And that part of me that's like, is this okay? Like, I don't even know why my soul is craving this, but it's craving space. It's craving space to hear myself. It's craving space to listen. It's craving seeing nature and putting my feet on the ground. But it's an adjustment. I mean, I love that you mentioned your unconsume yourself movement, because it is the ego fights tooth and nail to hold on to what it knows. And so I feel like in unconsuming ourselves, it's a free fall sometimes, and we have to let go and trust that we're being held. And that's a practice. that
Well,
sometimes I get and sometimes I don't.
so this is a really cool way of describing it. I like that you said it's like a free fall, because why is it a free fall? Because we're so attached to stuff and things and places and people. So when
Yeah.
we detach from those things, it is like what is holding us in place
Exactly.
identity wise, right? It's like, oh my
Exactly.
God, I just separated myself from everything that made up my identity before.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. And who am I now? Oh, I don't know. And I feel like culturally across the board, women right now, very likely in your community, are feeling this. Well, I'm not who I was, but I'm not exactly who I'm becoming. Like there's this massive transition that's happening for all of us, personally, collectively, where it's like, well, I can't hold on to the same things because they just don't work anymore. And so how can I trust that in letting go, I am held?
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And letting go, I am held. So how do you feel held now?
Mm,
Or let me ask it two ways and then go on
okay,
whatever tangent you want.
cool.
Let me rephrase that. What makes you feel held? And
Hmm.
how do you seek that out when you know you need it?
Okay, that's a beautiful question. I adore you, and I'm so happy to be talking
Thanks.
to you right now. Oh. Yeah. So, okay, first, I actually want to talk about all the short-term fixes that I do to try to feel held, because I think that's a really important distinction. And then, like,
Yeah.
what are the ways that I actually sustainably feel held?
Yes.
Okay. So here's the way that my patterning likes to give me the temporary illusion of control. Eating when I'm not hungry.
Oh yeah.
Drinking alcohol, which I don't do anymore, but that's one of the ways that the thought will come up or the pattern. So it's like drinking, eating, scrolling on social media, trying to figure out what's next, working. And then the list, of course, could go on and on, right? Relationships. I mean, you name it. Like, what are the quick fixes that make me feel like I can hold on to something else? Like, there's this discomfort in me when I feel like I'm in free fall. So I just think it's important to presence the short-term fixes that we all try to do to avoid the discomfort of feeling like we don't really have anything to hold on to or we don't know what's next. So just want to presence that first. Do you want to say anything about that before?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I actually was thinking something. I make my, you could probably tell I'm writing as you talk because I make my little notes so I can come back to things. But yeah, I think I also love how you keep bringing up the what's next, what's next, what's next.
Yeah.
I don't remember if I did a podcast or wrote a blog about this. Or it was just a post on social media at one point. But it's like the difference between the question of what's next and what's now.
Mm. Hmm. That just brings everything. It's simple. That question itself simplifies everything.
Yeah.
Like it's like I don't know. So what is today? What is right now? Like how can I be my best self and live my best day right now?
Yeah.
And trust that I will know what to do next when it's time to do something next. I love that question.
And you
What
probably see
next?
this a lot in your community too. I know I do, because people want, like you said, the illusion of control. Like a plan gives an illusion of control. A
Absolutely.
map gives an illusion of control. Just because you have a plan, just because you have a map, doesn't mean everything's gonna follow the plan or follow your map anyway. And
Yes.
so I think it's interesting how people don't necessarily like you said, it's an illusion because it's not actual control.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's gonna be so many plot twists and detours anyway.
Totally.
So there you go. Go on whatever tangent you want.
Okay, cool. So short-term fixes, we all know what they are. And I think if we really talk about like, well, what are those short-term fixes or the numbing out of the present moment? Like, what are they there for? They're there because we're so uncomfortable that we actually aren't in control of our lives. Like, I mean, we are and we aren't, right? This is the paradox, I think, of life. Like we have so much control in our thoughts and our actions and where we put ourselves and how we show up in the world. And simultaneously, we are absolutely out of control of some of the biggest things in life. So it's this paradox. And I learned that lesson so hard last year in so many different ways of both getting pregnant and then having a miscarriage, and then also living in Sonoma, California, where the fires are. And you know that because you've just gone through that of like there's this power that is so much greater than ourselves, that we can put ourselves in the right situations. We can be the best versions of ourselves that we can be, but ultimately we got to let go. We have to let go and be willing to go where life takes us in some ways, because we can only imagine this much of what's possible for our lives. And when we learn to do that letting go, when we do unconsume ourselves or simply let go of those short-term things we're trying so hard to hold on to, life can get really good. But it's scary as fuck for people, because it means, I love that the ding just dinged right when I said that. I don't know if you heard that
I
ding.
did hear that. I don't know whose side that was on.
It's scary. It's scary to let go. It's scary to admit that we're actually not in complete control of our lives. And then I know your original question was about what I do to connect.
Yeah.
And so that is, for me, it's being in nature. It's always being in nature. It's taking my music somewhere without my phone. It's being outside. It's creating community. So it's having, it's establishing a community here. So, and it's meditation. It's music. It's the tools in that way, but it's the tools that long-term connect me to who I am. So it's a yoga practice. It's a meditation practice. It's walking in nature. It's connecting with like-minded women. But it's not doing. All of those things are really attuning to my inner world, trusting that when I do that, my outer world falls into place.
This is another big distinction, I think. This is how you know. I think sometimes people want to know, what's the difference? How do I know if I'm numbing or if it's self-care? How do I know if I'm being avoidant or if I'm actually tending to my needs? And what you just said, long-term connect me to who I am. I think that's a distinction.
Yeah, absolutely.
Does eating this thing or doing this thing or watching 27 episodes of this show in one sitting long-term connect me to who I am? And listen, sometimes it might.
Yeah.
I think there are times when people do things like that consciously where it's like, yeah, this actually is because I need a freaking break. You know, or this cookie reminds me of my grandma and I'm missing my ancestors, you know, like I think there are times when it does and it doesn't. But what a great question to check in around to distinguish between what you're actually doing.
Yeah. Well, and I think the word choice is really important here, because if it's a short-term fix and it's numbing, usually you feel almost like a victim to it, or it's just happening and there's not as much choice. Like it just happens. Like I know that hamster wheel of like, before I know it, I'm, 3 episodes deep or a pint of ice cream deep, or I've created a whole new program that I want to launch tomorrow. Like, no, like that's like, that's not a long-term healthy way to do it. If I feel like my life is being taken over by a pattern, then it's usually not nourishing. So I think the word choice is important. Like, I can choose to eat what I want, drink what I want, do what I want, but knowing that it is a conscious choice that supports my whole being versus takes away from it.
Yeah. So I want to shift gears for a minute because I don't want to forget to ask you this question. I was on your website yesterday and I love that you have such an extensive like layout of your story. Mm-hmm. And I'm so curious, this might sound like an odd question. Maybe someone has asked you this before, maybe they haven't, but you grew up in Louisiana, yeah?
Yeah.
And you mentioned as well that both sides of your family are of Lebanese descent.
Yep.
What was it like being of Middle Eastern descent growing up in the South of the United States? Because I know in my mind, my perception of what I might assume, but truth be told, I've not spent that much time in the South of the United States, and I've never even stepped foot in Louisiana. So totally. I'm super curious about your experience.
Thanks for asking that question. That's actually not a question a lot of people ask. So thank you for picking up on it.
Yeah.
So this is going to be a really weird answer, but I think this is going to paint the picture of the where I grew up, and also so much of different parts of the country and the world. Growing up in Louisiana, you were either black or you were either white. That's what it felt like. It was you were either black or white. And I fit into the white category because I looked white. And so there was almost this is weird to say, but almost a denial of not a denial, because within my own culture, within my own family, there were languages, there were Lebanese, Arabic songs, there was food every Sunday. That we had a rich heritage, but it was something that I didn't talk about, that no one really knew about. It was something that I didn't really embrace until I got much older, and I was like, I'm 90% Lebanese. Like, that's Syrian. It wasn't even Syria at the time, but it was a little bit confusing growing up because I didn't totally fit into the white or the black category. But since I looked white, I looked white, and my town was divided. It was a white neighborhood, a black neighborhood, a white neighborhood, a black neighborhood. So it's almost like my ethnicity slid under the radar, and I think it was safe in that way. There was one Asian family in this town that I grew up with. There were 2 Jewish people in the town that I grew up with. So it was very Southern in that way. And I can answer any specific questions about it, but that is, it was very black and white.
Yeah. So this is interesting. I'm curious about, so like the erasure, that's the word that I was hearing when you were talking about it, right?
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
Behind closed doors, inside your family, like everyone knows that you are what you talk about. And I can really relate to that because most of my family, the greatest parts of my heritage are Italian and Puerto Rican. And, there were family traditions and there's things and whatever. And, I'm very ethnically ambiguous. So I understand what that's like for people to like want to be putting you into a category and lumping you into a place that you don't specifically belong. Like every single time you get, I don't know is there a category for Middle Eastern? Like if you have to choose an ethnicity on a thing, or are you a card holding member of the other box as well?
The other, it's other. You're white or other. Like those are the options.
It's like Caucasian, Hispanic, African American, and then it's like Asian, other. And I'm like, well, I'm a couple of these things, so we're going to go with other. Yeah, that's just an interesting, I'm curious just for your own perspective that I know is reflective now. Did that have any impact on your identity?
Yeah, well, I think what you just said really struck a chord with me. It was like, for me growing up, I never felt like I fit in. I never felt like I fit into the town, to the community, to the group of women or children. I was kind of the outsider, and not only in the community, but also in the family. So, which I know that many of the women in your community can probably really relate to, just like feeling that, just like that not belonging. And so even as you said that really shifted something in me of like, oh, like there's that part of it. It was like, I never felt like I could fully be myself and have that be understood.
Yeah.
So that drive to be understood, that drive, that the to be understood, to be known, to know myself, absolutely catalyzed the greatest spiritual journey of my life, which is just like, who am I? Right. So that's interesting, right? To even loop back to what I said at the beginning, that universal truth, that question of like, who am I? Like, I thought I didn't know, but it's like, I had to go on the journey to realize that I did know all along. But that question itself was absolutely planted as a child, feeling like I never really fit in, or never really knew who I was, or never could be fully who I was. Yeah. So, yeah.
And I know you've traveled extensively, so I'm curious, how were you treated in other cultures, and how was it different from the US?
Yeah. I traveled a lot. I lived abroad. I lived in Latin America for some time, and I looked Latina enough. And I remember being in love with Latin American culture and Middle Eastern culture and writers and painters as a kid, as a 10-year-old, as a 12-year-old, as a teenager. Like that, I would, read poetry by Pablo Neruda and like read endless biographies of Frida Kahlo as a kid. And so I always identified with people from other cultures. And so when I would travel, I felt it's this interesting place of feeling at home in different countries. And I will say that some of my most profound homecoming spiritual experiences happened in other countries. Now, I don't think we need to go to India or South America to do the work of finding home. But for me, giving myself permission to allow home to be malleable and mutable, and to know that like, wow, I can find this wherever I am, has been such a profound journey. So I actually always felt like I fit in more in other countries than I did.
Interesting. Yeah,
here.
I was after I asked you that question, I was thinking I would also like to ask, where did you feel the most welcome? Because I think there's a difference between feeling like you belong and also feeling welcome.
Mm-hmm. Mm. So I felt the most welcome in India, in Bali, both of those places. I also felt the most welcome in certain communities. I spent some time in Cuba, and then I lived in Argentina in a small community for about a year, and I was one of them. And so I don't know if that's necessarily a Latina cultural thing, because I didn't feel that everywhere, but I immersed myself into a community. And I think that's part of it, which is, for me, I became very clear in my early 20s that I had been an introvert my whole life trying to be an extrovert. And when I gave myself permission to be an introvert, it changed everything. And I realized that I actually wanted to go deep with people and in my life and not wide. And then so choosing the communities to go deep with, and then receiving the reflection and feedback of belonging when I chose to root somewhere.
Yeah.
So I would say I felt really welcome in India and Bali. Those were probably two of the places that I felt the most welcome, and also the most at home with myself, which is, I think, an interesting mirror.
Yeah. So that's really interesting how you say like immersing in a community, because that's actually something I've been thinking about since I moved here. And I'm curious for your experience of moving to San Francisco and building and becoming part of community there, as well as in the new place where you are. Because since I've moved here, I live in a townhouse. My house is literally connected to two other people's houses, and I have not met any of these people.
Yeah.
I've been here for 5 months. I literally haven't met a single neighbor. Like, I smile, like I wave or whatever. There was a Christmas party that I couldn't go to. That would have given me a chance to meet some people. Yeah. But I just feel like it's bizarre. Like, my head is on the other side of the, like, I probably am sleeping next to someone.
Totally.
I'm probably separated by 7 feet.
Yeah, you could probably just meet them through the wall. Just knock on the wall.
Yeah. Hey, good night. Right? But I haven't even met these people. And like, have I gone and knocked on their door? No, I haven't. But like, there's just like it's not like a, hey, welcome to the community, you know? Yeah. So interesting. And I've had that experience in other places where I moved in, where it's like, yeah, there's all these people, but you like literally don't even know your neighbors.
Totally. So I don't know about here yet. You know, I've been here a couple of months. Most of the people in this tiny town of 1,000 people are over 50, 60, like retirees. So, you know, it's just different. Here's what I'll say about it. I am an introvert, like I said. I need a lot of time alone. And simultaneously, the shadow side of that is that I can isolate. Yeah. And my soul does not like that, especially as women. Like I need the oxytocin of being in the physical presence of other women's bodies. That's why it feels so good to be in circle or to be on retreats. And I know you have that experience from all of your wild soul retreats and everything. So I'll tell you what my plan is.
Yeah, and tell me your plan. Give me some ideas.
And then maybe we can commit to each other. So one of the things that I know is that I need community that I am receiving from just as much as giving. So I was really clear, like I didn't want to hold a new moon circle or a women's gathering and be the leader, or be the one. Like I need, no, I do enough of that in my work and that fuels me, but I need women who stand at my side and can fill my cup so that I can then give that full cup away. So thoughts for me right now are like, I know 2 women who live in my area. I'm like, okay, great. I can invite those 2 women and then I can ask them to invite 3 other women and I can just have a potluck. Like just a potluck, and I may do it around the moon. You know, I may do that. It may be around writing or creativity. It may just be around like hanging out and doing some ritual because I kind of don't really like all the small talk all the time. I also like ritualizing things, but I don't want to lead it. So that's what I'm feeling, but I need something consistently. So I'm not sure how I'll do it. But I'm just going to start. I don't have to figure it all out. I just have to take the next step. And what I know is I need community and I need women's bodies in my house. And so I think I'm going to just do like a friends of friends potluck.
I really like the idea of these are the people I know and let me have them invite people they know. This is cool. Yeah, I'm totally with you because I'm like really, really with you on craving that community, but not having it be something I lead. Like when I first moved here, I was like, I'm going to run full moon circles and things like that. I'm like, I'm going to do it every single month. And then I was like, I don't want to do this every single month. Where I was in San Diego, I was going to moon circles every month, actually, usually twice on the new moon and the full moon. And I loved it because I loved going to a thing where I could just go receive and not hold the space. I joined the Soho House here primarily to get involved in community. But what's interesting about the Soho House, have you ever been to one?
No. Mm-mm.
So it's a members club and there's a lot of famous and or high profile people there. We'll put high profile in air quotes. We'll put important in air quotes.
All of this in air quotes, right?
Yeah,
yes.
All of this is in air quotes. This is not how I evaluate people, but it's the scale that the Soho House uses apparently.
Totally.
But and so part of it is there's a no approach policy, which is cool, right? Because, you know, some celebrity can come be there and not have to worry about paparazzi or 17 people coming up being like, I love your movie or asking for their autograph. But what it also means is that you're kind of surrounded by people, you're not talking to anyone, you know?
Totally.
And you know, occasionally like, you bump into someone or whatever, you have a little small talk, but I'm with you. But they have events and stuff. So that, like, my commitment is really going to a couple of their events a month. Like, at the time of recording this, tomorrow night I'm going to bingo.
Ah, that's so fun.
It's going to be so fun. And I invited 2 of my friends, so you can have guests. So I continuously find things I want to go to, and then I invite people, and then I plan to like meet more people when I get there. So I can also relate to what you said about the community here is a lot older. I go to these dance classes, and sometimes I'm probably the youngest person there by like anywhere from 10 to 30 years. Yeah. But it's kind of cool. It's kind of cool to, I mean, I crave that. I crave the wisdom of elders.
Yeah, I do too. And one of the things you're saying, like just practically, I think is so important is like, okay, one, I set the intention that local community is important to me. Mm-hmm. That's number one, right? You set the intention. That's number one. Number two, you just put yourself in situations where you find somebody like what you're saying. Like I'm going to start pottery classes next month. I've never done anything like that before. I'm going to do it because it's like, that sounds fun to me. I don't have to have my work be my only creative outlet. And then I can meet people, right? I can go to yoga classes. And it's like, if I meet one person who feels like a like-minded person, they very likely know one other person. And so like, that's kind of, so the practical piece. I love that you're going to bingo. I love that you're going to bingo so much. Yeah. You just said something. What was the last thing that you said that just, it stood out to me?
Oh, craving the wisdom of elders?
Yes. Thank you for speaking that. That is something that changed for me last year in a profound way. And it feels like just an important thing to acknowledge of we're such babies. We are such babies in so many ways. And just humbling myself enough to know that there is so much wisdom from the Crones in the world, the women who have just walked this earth longer, who have seen. And so I just like bow myself at their feet and learn from them. And so that just really stood out to me. So I just want to speak
and for anyone listening, when Julie says crone, like I know you, so I know this, and I feel the same way. Like that's a word of reverence for us. That's not a dig. I know in our culture that word might not have a positive association, but for us it does. And I think one of the reasons why I crave the wisdom of elders is because I also crave, to come back to that word we used earlier, erasure. I crave to create a world where by the time I am an elder, I am not being erased.
Yes.
So I like to be able to honor older women and like listen and value, you know, any kind of growth, any kind of depth, any kind of wisdom is available at any age. I really believe that.
Yeah.
And there's still an amount of value that life experience has, like time on the field, time on the earth.
Yeah. Absolutely. I feel that so deeply.
Quick break in the show to invite you to join the waitlist for a free tool that I've been working on here behind the scenes for a couple of months now called the Trust Assessment. If you're new to the show, you might not know that trust is something that threads through every single thing I do and every single thing that I create. And if you've been listening for a while, you definitely already know that. Trust is the number one problem people don't know they have. The level of trust that you have in yourself and in life affects everything, and that's not an exaggeration. If you head on over to wildsoulmovement.com/trust-waitlist, you will be placed on the waitlist to know as soon as the trust assessment is available, which will be on or around March 5th, if you're listening in real time. What you'll get when you complete the assessment is a free personalized trust score, a breakdown of how your current level of trust could be impacting your life, plus stress-free recommendations for what you can do about it. And again, like I mentioned, trust is a problem that a lot of people don't even know they have. So if you're sitting there thinking, I don't know if this applies to me, there's only one way to find out. Take the assessment. Again, the link is wildsoulmovement.com/trust-waitlist. Now back to the show.
Can we talk about the mother and maiden crone?
Yeah.
Maiden and mother crone. It just feels like just an important thing of like, in so many traditions, there's this idea of the triple goddess, right? That we as women go through these three phases in our lives: maiden, mother, crone. And no one of them is more important than the other. Now, our society, we know, tends to revere maiden, tends to revere, younger, thin bodies, like beauty in its physical young form, which we know is changing. And then we move into the mother, and it doesn't mean you actually have to mother children, right? It's just, but what is it? What's the energy, the archetype of the mother, of caring for, of creating, etc. So women who are creators, right? Yourself and I, neither of us have children, but yet we're mothering. Like we are in that phase of our lives in so many ways. And then at some point we transition into being the crone, like the third of the triple crown of the goddess, if you will. And it is just the woman who we bow to her wisdom. Because she's gone through all three phases. So just knowing that there's so many different phases of being a woman, and that there's different truths in each phase of that form of our lives whenever we walk in them. So just wanted to explain that word even a little bit more.
I love that. I only have 2 tattoos, and one of them is on my left foot, and it's that triple goddess symbol of the full moon in the middle and the waning moon and the waxing moon on the other side.
Yep. Of course.
Yep. So
beautiful.
I would like to talk a little bit more about mothering. And this is an interesting thing. And if you want to talk about miscarriage, you can. We totally don't have to. I know you've written about it, but I like to be mindful of that, depending on where people are with their experience. What I find to be so interesting, this is a funny, it's the equivalent of a guilty pleasure, but I don't feel guilty about it. So I'm in the camp of I don't want children. And, I reserve the right to change my mind for everything, but I'm pretty open about it. And obviously I don't begrudge people who have children. I love that other people have children. I'm actually going to be an auntie for the first time coming up this year. So I'm
Congrats.
so pumped. When my brother told me, I was like, yes, now I really don't have to have a baby.
Totally.
And I know for some people, the thing they want more than anything in the world is to have a baby. So I always like to acknowledge that as well. Yeah. But there's this term, right? Like women without children are described as childless. And I recently started following these accounts on Instagram, and the hashtag is child-free or child-free living. And I, number one, appreciated the reframe of being like child-free versus childless, because less implies that like there's a thing you're supposed to have that you're without.
Right.
As well, there's just these hilarious memes. And it really is like digging on people who have children. So it could be contentious. You might not want to check it out if you're sensitive to that, anyone listening. But if you're into it, it could be really, really, really funny. You got to take it with a grain of salt, though. So mothering, not in the sense of raising a child, is a very real thing. So what is your experience? I mean, you have your Gratitude Circle Facebook group alone. How many people are that now? Is it like 35,000 or something?
Yeah, almost 40,000 people.
That's amazing. So like you're holding space for 40,000 people, do you have people helping you moderate that?
I do now. Yeah, just in the past year though. So
but it's still your energetic space.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. So do you just want me to jam on mothering and different forms of mothering?
Yeah, go for it. And if you want me to ask you something specific, I will, but I have a feeling you could just go for it.
Okay, I'll just go for it, and then you just interject with questions if, at any point that you want.
Great.
Um, okay. I'll talk about the mothering piece first. Hang on. Let me actually feel into where I want to start.
Great.
Ugh, I want to talk about the miscarriage first.
Okay.
Okay, so that's what's real, which I didn't think I was going to go there, but that's what's real. So I was not sure if I wanted to have a child when we got pregnant. So I've been in a partnership with my husband for many years, and kind of knew January a year ago we were getting a little close. Probably shouldn't have had the unprotected sex that we had, and lo and behold, I got pregnant. So when I got pregnant, I was very excited. It wasn't a decision. It wasn't a conscious decision that either my husband or I made. But when it was there, it was like, okay, this is what we're doing, and what a gift. And I felt what it must feel like to be initiated into mothering a physical baby. Mm-hmm. Like even before I got pregnant, I started kicking people out of my space. I started nesting and cleaning the apartment. I started getting super clear on what, like, the shit that I was doing that actually just wasn't in alignment. And then in the, weeks, months of being pregnant, same. It was just this fierceness. Like, I don't give a fuck what anybody thinks. It was mama bear mode. And I've never had that experience in the same way, this visceral, physical experience of just this primal mother. And then, of course, when I had the miscarriage, I was devastated on an emotional level, of course, but then also, like anything, you make plans and then plans change, and then there's a grieving period no matter what. And I knew, because of the way that I live my life, that if it's not this, it's something else. It's just something. If it's not this, it's either this or something better. That's the way that I live my life. And so when the miscarriage happened, it was like, okay, it's not this. It's something this or better. And it's just, I can surrender to right timing, and maybe this isn't right timing. And I am so grateful for it, because what happened in 2017 would not have happened had I been pregnant. What it catalyzed in my marriage and in my own work and in my own purpose, and just the level of trust and surrender that I have now, is so profoundly different. I just feel like the experience of miscarriage initiated me into a rawness in a way that I never have felt before. So that's what I want to say first. The second piece is I then found a book called Complete Without Kids. So if you haven't read that, it's a great book.
Oh,
if
cool.
any of you are like considering, it's a psychiatrist, and they follow all these different people's stories about people who chose not to have kids, about people who just waited too long and then it was too late, or people who tried and couldn't get pregnant. So I really went into my own journey of like, how is it that I want to mother? How do I want to mother? Do I want to mother? It wasn't like I got pregnant, had the miscarriage, and was like, now I want babies. It was like, let me really think about this consciously, how I want to mother. And now, for 9 months, I mean, the baby was due in October, which happened to be when the fires happened in Sonoma and we were evacuated from our home for 3 weeks. I would have been giving birth at that time.
I just got the biggest, like, full body shiver when you said that.
It's so important to remember, and I say this for myself more than anyone else, that life is doing for us what we can't do for ourselves sometimes. Yeah. And I never would have, and I couldn't have understood it until the fires literally raged through this town and almost burnt our house down, that I would have been bringing a baby into the world, into that level of trauma. And I just got on my knees, like, thank you, thank you, thank you. Because I didn't know until I knew. And so I say that because I was in a 9-month mourning period, and it wasn't until November where I really started even considering, is this what I want? And so sometimes I know, and sometimes I don't know. But I think what is so important is whether I choose to parent or not, I am already a mother. And I think all women are, whether they parent children or not. How we interact in our relationships with strangers, how we create, how we tend to ourselves. We are mothering all the time. And it's simply that choice of how we want to do it. And I think that's always changing. Like you said, you reserve the right to change your mind.
Yeah.
How you mother now may be different. We know it will be different than how you mother a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. It's the ever evolving nature of woman.
Yeah.
So that's all I want to say about motherhood.
I like it. I really appreciate it. And I do want to just take a moment to honor the mothers who have birthed babies.
Yes. Thank you.
Because, I do believe all women are mothers. But of course, like you and I can't relate to someone who's raising people right now.
Holy hell. Exactly.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. For
these
sure.
women.
100%. I mean, every time I'm out in public and I see a woman like on her own grocery shopping, I want to be like, can I get something for you? Like, can I carry? I was on a flight. I don't know if I've talked about this on the podcast before. I was on a flight. I did a lot of traveling February, March, April last year. And I was on a flight somewhere between Spain and Portugal. I can't remember where I was coming from, where I was going to. And there was this woman with like a 2 or 3 year old. And the kid was basically having to fit the whole flight.
Yeah.
And when the flight was over, and they were sitting right behind me, and I was not irritated. Like, I hadn't noticed anything about it. I was just like, the whole time I'm thinking, like, this poor woman must feel like she wants to, like, crawl under the seat. I'm sure she would do anything for the kid to feel better, and I'm sure she feels, maybe she does, maybe she doesn't, feel mortified. But I had gotten a couple peeks of her face when I had gotten up to go to the bathroom. I knew she did. So anyway, when the flight was over, I looked at her, and I'm like, are you okay? Like, I asked her, I'm like, are you okay? I mean, I know she'll be fine, but are you okay? Like,
good for you.
I was like, Jesus, that must have been like so traumatizing. And
that's amazing, Liz. Like that's absolutely amazing. Like, and how can we honor the women? Like, how can we honor mothers? How can we honor the women? How can we honor that we all just go through this shit? And I love that there was a choice where like half that plane was probably annoyed, more than half the plane. Yeah. So just thank you for that model of what it's like to connect human to human, of how challenging life can be and how challenging. I mean, I can barely take care of myself sometimes. I mean, let's get real. So taking care of other humans, like just, it's incredible. It's incredible. And it's selfless and it's, beyond belief.
So I'm curious what you would think of this. This is something I've been reflecting on lately, and goes back to what you were saying earlier about really needing and craving space. So I need a lot of space too, and I can also relate to what you said about being an introvert, trying to be an extrovert your whole life. I'm a pretty extroverted person, but I also have my very, very introverted qualities. I need a lot of time to myself, and obviously, like I said, I have this whole friggin' house to myself. I need a lot of space to myself too. So sometimes. It's very rare I feel guilty about anything anymore. And it's not even that I feel guilty, but sometimes I feel a little self-conscious, bordering on self-indulgent, that I have the time, the space, the means, and the ability to really put like an endless amount of time, energy, effort, and attention into my growth, into my development. And I had an epiphany around this recently, and it comes around to this mothering without children thing, which is that really is what I'm doing. I'm really holding space for a lot of people in a lot of different contexts. So in fact, I need that to be able to do what I do. And so to compare myself to people who have children or full-time jobs or whatever, it's apples and oranges. It's like, I don't know how I wasn't seeing. I tell people all the time, like, that famous quote, who I think it gets attributed to Ben Franklin, but I don't think he really said it, that like comparison is the thief of all joy.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm doing the same thing. I'm comparing apples and oranges.
Yeah. Thanks for speaking that piece. I totally have had that feeling, especially I have a younger sister who works a full-time job, still like lives in Louisiana, has 2 children under the age of 4, 3.5, and every time I say I'm tired, I can like feel her wanting to like punch me in the face. I'm like, you don't know tired. So thank you for speaking the apples to oranges piece. I will say this is what came to mind as you were speaking that is, it doesn't matter how we're mothering, whether we're mothering children or mothering a community or serving, I would say even as the spiritual leaders in our families, like whether, however that looks, or in our communities, like it doesn't matter how we are mothering others. Our primary job is to mother ourselves. Period. Because if we're not doing that, A, we're of no use to anyone else, right? And B, nobody's going to give us permission to do it for us.
Yeah.
And when we don't mother ourselves, it's how we end up feeling resentful in relationships and how we end up feeling burnt out. And so I think your apples to oranges thing is absolutely huge to remember that we don't get to compare. But secondly, the simple question is, in the context of my given life, how can I mother myself?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so you mother yourself is the way you mother yourself, right? My life is different. A woman with 3 children who works full time, how she mothers herself is going to be different. But I think we get into this. The sun's coming through right now. I think we get into this. We have this belief system that it is either self-indulgent or fill in the blank, that taking time for ourselves is wasted time. And I think it's so important for all of us to remember that our primary obligation is to mother ourselves. And when we do that, right? When we do that, everyone benefits. And how each person mothers is different. Mothering yourself may be literally locking yourself in your bathroom for 15 minutes and reading your book on your toilet to get away from your kids, if you aren't able to create any more space. So I don't know. I think the mothering ourselves is a really great thing that connects all of us, no matter what our obligations are.
You know, Rebecca Barucki, right?
Yes.
Bex posted something. She's been on the podcast. Bex posted something on Instagram the other day that was basically a picture from inside her car. And she has 5 kids. So she was like in the car, Tracy Chapman, heat on, and it was like a blizzard outside. She lives in New Jersey. And she's like, this is how I'm doing motherhood right now, or something like that. I was like, perfect. This is how it's working out that day for that person. So I appreciate you saying that, because I think it's important that we not only honor our own experience, but that we honor everyone else's and not as judgment about it, and not compare ourselves and make ourselves wrong or think that we should be doing something else that we're not. So I want to talk about gratitude. This is what you do. So your Facebook group with almost 40,000 people in it is called the Gratitude Circle. And your deck, I think they're called Shine Cards, but is it about gratitude as well?
No, I mean, it's about positivity. It's about learning to be grateful for what is. It is about learning to be grateful for what is, because I think that's the whole point of life. It's like, how do I love the shadow just as much as I love the light? Yeah. And that's what gratitude is all about.
So what made you start that Facebook, and when did you start it? I don't remember. It's been a couple years now, right?
It's been a while. So I started it 4 years ago. Wow. I know, it's crazy. I actually started it. So there were 2 things. So one, I had experienced in my 20s, I had experienced such a tremendous amount of depression and anxiety, and I was in this corporate job and just really suppressing and in denial of who I was, and could not shake the negativity that I was feeling with a false face of positivity. So like I did that pretty well, of pretending that everything was okay. And on the inside, I was just like, everything sucks. And objectively, my life was amazing. Like, I have a very firm grasp on the way the majority of the world looks and works. And so it was very weird to me that I could not get out of my own head about how I was just in a negative vortex of all of the stuff. And so I heard about the practice of like, keep a gratitude journal next to your bed, blah, 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 blah. So I did it. And this was 5-6 years ago. This is when I was still working on Wall Street. And it really began to shift my life slowly. But I learned to master what was in front of me and how to be so grateful for what was. And it was only then that the life really opened the doors for what was next. So it's just so, and you know that, like just so, so important. So anyways, that was years ago. And then I studied Kundalini yoga in India. And so part of the Kundalini yoga tradition is that you do these 40-day practices, and it takes 40 days to rewire your brain. There's all this science behind the blood cells and what happens over a 40-day period. And so I had done these 40-day practices that had tremendously changed my life, because I had a hard time committing to anything. And so when I committed to something for 40 days so that was the background. And then 4 years ago, I was like, what if I combine these 2 things with some friends between Thanksgiving and the New Year? There were like 30 people in the group, and it was everyone that I knew. It was then my mom, my cousins, my friends, and then it was 100 people and 300 people and 800 people. And every year we do this 40-day gratitude challenge where it's like I post an inspiration and we do this 40 days together. And then in between, it's like a choose your own gratitude adventure where people can commit to doing it for 10 days or 5 days. And we do it as a collective community because sometimes when we feel like shit about our lives and we can be in the energy of other people looking for what's good, it has the ability. We entrain together. We know that our hearts and our brains and our thoughts entrain to the people that we're around. And so there's just this collective power of doing it together that's kind of blowing me away.
I love that.
It wasn't ever a thing that I was like, I want to build this big thing and it's part of my business. It was just like I followed my heart, and it's a part of my contribution to the world.
I love that. So I have another question that I'm so excited that you will be able to answer because, so you mentioned that this kind of awakening / getting on this path started about 5 or 6 years ago as you were in corporate. And how long have you been with your husband? Because longer than that, right?
Oh, this is such a great question. Yeah, my husband and I have been together for over 10 years.
Okay. So you know the question that's coming. Because a lot of women struggle with this. You're probably one of the first people I've had on the show who's going to be able to answer the question. Maybe. What do I do? Well, maybe not, because I don't know. Maybe your husband's on a growth path as well. Did you start growing before he did?
Uh-huh.
Yes, you can answer the question. So how did that work for you? Because I know some people, whether it's their husband or their family or whatever, I'm specific about the husband or the boyfriend or the partner. How did that go as you started going down this growth path and getting, spiritual woo-woo, however you want to call it, before or where? So I'm so excited I'm not even able to formulate the question.
I know your question.
I know you know what I'm asking you.
I love you. I adore you.
Because I think everyone is afraid that all their relationships are going to fall apart. And I know yours hasn't. So tell us.
I feel like, by the way, I think this in and of itself could be a whole other freaking podcast.
I know. We could do it again. But let's see whatever we could do in the next 9 minutes.
Yeah. So we'll jam for as long as we can. And then this is such a big question. And I couldn't have spoken about it until maybe a year ago, because we were still in it.
Yeah.
So, okay. So here, first and foremost, this is what I want to say. It is possible to come out on the other side of your own spiritual path and have your partner rise to meet you. So there's a quote by Naranjan Kaur, and she says, "Change the woman and you will change the man. Heal the woman and you'll heal the man." Now, we don't want that to be the fucking case. We don't want to have to do this work on our own. We don't want to feel like we have to be the ones to like do it and lead it, and like he's not coming and he doesn't get it. And so, God, I could say so much about this. So let me just give you the practical stuff. So my husband and I got married almost 5 years ago. And I had quit my corporate job. So I had quit the job, but I hadn't really come out of the spiritual closet yet. We got married, and within a few months of getting married, I quit drinking alcohol, found Kundalini yoga. I really started tapping into my own kind of intuitive, psychic, whatever you'll call that. And I was like, oh, by the way, we're married. And like, I am not who you thought I was. And so I feel like I just need to acknowledge as well, like this didn't just happen in a relationship. This happened within 6 months of us being married. My husband had been an engineer, and he 180'd his life to become a firefighter. I had been a Wall Street trader, and I had 180'd my life to do the work that I do now. And so for all intents and purposes, our relationship was shell-shocked in the first year of our marriage. And it sucked. It felt lonely. It felt isolating. And there were times where I really wasn't sure if we were going to make it. And it's important to acknowledge that, because I think every single woman who is on a spiritual path is so deeply afraid that she will lose the people that she loves. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a shadow of, it's a shadow side of this work of like, in order for me to be me, I'm not going to get love. So I can talk more about that belief system, because that's such a belief system for me, that I had to be someone else and to get love. So what I started doing is I started focusing on myself, and I let go of whether or not he was going to come with me. Mm. And it didn't mean that there wasn't fear, but what it meant is that I dove even deeper into my own journey, into my community of women. And I learned how to use my voice, how to have needs, how to accept myself, and to love myself first. Not in the context of the relationship. There were times where, of course, I wanted him to come to yoga with me, to do the sound healing with me, to learn how to meditate, to go to therapy, to work on his childhood stuff. Like, I have a long list of things that I did that worked for me that I assumed that he would need to do too in order for him to meet me here. But like I said a moment ago, we entrain to each other. And so as I continued to raise my I don't want to vibration. I'll just say that because that's what's coming to mind. But as I continued to up level who I was and what I needed, he had an invitation. Will you come or won't you? And on a soul level, right? My soul was calling his soul forth. On a human level, yeah, it was completely messy and imperfect, right? And I have needs that I would express, and sometimes he would meet them and sometimes he wouldn't. But what I will say is that I am now in this, and I don't mean to tie a bow around it because it's not perfect. No relationship is. Yeah. But what I can say here and now is that the more comfortable that I have become with myself, the more that I have fallen in love with myself and focused on my creativity, my own growth, my own spiritual healing, the more he's become the man that I wanted him to be, that I literally did not think he could become. Like, I did not think it was in him. And he surprised me again and again. He surprised me. But I let go of needing to bring him along and was just like, I'm walking up this fucking mountain and the view's awesome up here. And you can either come or not. Yeah. And I think I would have had a choice point. And of course, relationships and life are long and you know, we have no idea how things will all go. But I think as I got more comfortable on my needs, I could ask him for them and let go. And simultaneously, I guess what I'm saying is there was a point a couple of years ago where I was like, God, spirit, whatever you want to say, I need him to wake the fuck up. Because I have all this work to do and this is not working. And then I heard this phrase. I heard the phrase, you need to be the woman. Hang on, let me tune into what exactly it was. So my prayer, and this was the prayer, it came as a phrase and then became a prayer. God, help me be the woman I need to be so that he can be the man I want him to be. Help me be the woman I need to be. Yeah. And so that became my work. I took the focus off of him. I took the fear out of the picture and I focused on myself. And then when I did that and stopped trying to micromanage his experience, he showed up. And I realized that's not the experience of every woman, right? Sometimes, but he did. Yeah. And that's kind of a miracle.
This goes back to the conversation we were having earlier about the paradox of so many things being in our control and so many things not being in our control. And the things that are not in our control in some cases are like the biggest, most important feeling things. Like, is he going to come or is he not gonna?
Totally. And I got to a place, and this is actually when all of the change started taking place, where I literally put my marriage on the altar.
Yeah.
You know, like, divine, I pray to care more about your will for me than any attachment I have to my marriage.
Yeah.
Like, and that's the part about the surrender. Like, that takes work to get there, where we're like, actually, I am whole and complete and willing to, and I can feel that in my heart. Like, I have a preference. I want to stay with my husband, but divine, please help me surrender to your will. And if he's a part of it, great. And if he's not, okay. So it takes a tremendous amount of surrender.
So much surrender, because I think surrender is a big part of not being attached. And we're so cultured to be so attached to things and be so codependent and be so like enmeshed with like what other people are doing and like you said, micromanaging. So Thank you for that. I'm sure so many people can relate. We could talk more about this another time too. So I like to ask people some just fun questions at the end that have nothing to do with anything we've talked about.
Awesome.
So you mentioned earlier going for walks, being out in nature, bringing your music. Like what's right now? What's like the first thing that you would put in your headphones?
Oh, that's a great question. Hang on. I need to actually tell you the name of it because it's so good. And my computer's right here. I mean, my phone's right here. So what I've been listening to lately is Rachel Fairbanks.
Ooh, I've never heard of her.
Rachel Fairbanks, Gaia Kirtan. It's so good. I'm going to show it to you. This is it. See
cool.
her?
Yeah, I'll look that up. Do you know who CeCe White is?
No.
It's funny because as you were talking earlier about mothering, I was thinking I have to tell you about CeCe White. She does kirtan, and it's soul kirtan because she's like a soul singer. And so her kirtan is like she tours with like musical artists all over the world. She is an amazing singer.
Awesome.
So look up CeCe White. I think it's called Soul Kirtan, but
awesome.
Especially the song Karuna Sagari Ma. So freaking good. And I'll text that to you so you know how to spell it, even though you could probably just sound it out. Okay. What are you reading right now?
2 books. Seed of the Soul.
I just started that one recently too.
So good. And Anam Cara by John O'Donohue. I also just bought Marianne Williamson's book, The Law of Divine Compensation. I'm like 3 pages in. I'm usually reading 2 or 3 books at one time.
Yeah, me too. I've never actually read a Marianne Williamson book all the way through. Have you?
The only one, 3 months ago, A Woman's Worth. Have you read that one?
No.
Have you heard of that one?
No.
You'll love that. A Woman's Worth. It's the first Marianne Williamson book that I read all the way through. Short. I think it was written in the 80s. It was one of her earlier books. And it's super empowering for right now.
Oh, cool. I will check that out. Do you watch TV of any kind?
I do. I didn't for a really long time, but I started recently. Outlander.
I've heard good things about that.
Stranger Things. And I just started This Is Us.
Oh, girl. Tissues. Always bring the tissues for This Is Us. It's so good. I was like on Instagram. I needed Sterling K. Brown, I think is his name, to win because I love Randall. I'm so glad you watched that. People tag me in memes about crying over that. Like I don't just cry every episode. I like sob. It is like ugly. Sometimes I have a headache afterwards.
Totally. How about Parenthood? Did you ever watch Parenthood?
I did not, but I've heard it's similar.
Similar. Very similar. So good.
And you also mentioned like writers and poets earlier, and you named a couple. But any other artists? You said painters too. I know you said Frida Kahlo.
Yeah, I mean, I think Frida's big for me. I'm trying to think about other painters.
It's okay if there aren't.
Well, no, you know who's actually really beautiful, and she's a dear soul sister friend, is Shiloh Sophia McLeod. Have you ever seen any of her work, Shiloh's work?
Girl, the Mother Mary Oracle deck by Alana Fairchild that she illustrated is my favorite deck.
Yes. So Shiloh's incredible. If you ever get a chance, she has workshops. She lives down the street. She lives 10 minutes away.
It's so funny. When I was little, my dad, you remember Bob Ross, right?
Yeah.
My dad, we'd watch Bob Ross, and my dad had this Bob Ross painting set. And I always wanted to learn how to paint, but I never did. And I remember being on her website. Here. I will totally do that.
Come on. You can stay with me. We'll go to
Shiloh and we will go paint. Yes. Well, this brings us home. Thanks, Julie.
You're amazing. This is so beautiful.
Literally, figuratively, metaphorically, brings us home.
Brings us home.
So thank you so much. Everybody listening, this was episode number 235. So we mentioned a lot of things in this episode. You can find links to all of it, including Julie's work and her Facebook group, her Oracle deck, and things like that, affirmation deck, at untameyourself.com/T as in truth, T as in telling, -235. So Julie, thank you as always. I look forward to our painting Sonoma adventures.
Much love, honey. Thank you.
When I was creating my program, my first program, what I did was it was like reverse engineering. I figured out, how did I get brainwashed in the first place, and then I compared a healthy home versus an unhealthy home. And I began to understand, children from healthy homes feel seen. I never felt seen. Children from healthy homes are allowed to express their emotions. I never had that, It's okay to be angry in an unhealthy home. You're taught life skills. It's okay to make a mistake. Parents are supposed to be inquisitive about your day. How do you feel? What do you think? What happened today? So I began to understand what was missing. And then I understood that I had to give that to myself. That was part of my reprogramming process,
Yeah.
you know?